and get started on making our sauce. So one of the first things it is that we need to do is we need to start going ahead and preheating our pan so it'll be nice and hot whenever we put our vegetables in. So you want to go ahead and preheat your pan to medium low, just enough to get the pan hot so that when you add the oil and your ingredients, they'll start to begin to cook, and then we can raise the heat once we get our ingredients in the pot. So what we're going to start doing is we're going to start making the base of our sauce, which is called the Sofrito. And in Italian and Latin cultures, they're both very familiar with what a Sofrito is. A Sofrito is going to yield a lot of flavor. It's going to yield a lot of great texture and punch to whatever sauce it is that you're making. And it's very similar to a French mirepoix. And a mirepoix is 2 parts onion, 1 part celery, and 1 part carrot. So the ratio of mirepoix, when it comes to the parts of onion and celery and carrot that you put in actually varies, and to be honest with you, in all 3 of those types of cuisines, Italian, Latin, and French, they're all very personal, meaning that you kind of cook and you kind of make it your way, your own. What I can also tell you in the American culture, specifically like Creole Cajun cooking, is there's something known as a Cajun Mirepoix. And a Cajun Mirepoix actually omits the carrot and is onion, bell pepper, and celery. And usually is the base for things like gumbo or jambalaya or some sort of dish that requires some sort of a sauce or even soups. So in order to make the sofrito for our bolognese, we're going to need to start chopping up 1 onion. And one of the things that we're going to need to do, I guess we don't really need to remove that. We'll just go ahead and chop off. This is the end of the onion. See right here we have what is known as the root end of the onion. You want to go ahead and keep that on, and I'll show you why here in just a moment. Definitely makes it easier to chop. But we're going to go ahead and peel the onion. And we're only really going to use about half of this onion. We're not going to use the whole thing. This is actually a fairly pretty large onion. And if you have a bag, plastic bag or something like that lying around, it'll be good for putting in your kitchen scraps. If you're really savvy, you can use your kitchen scraps to make a stock later on. And that's something that I can show in subsequent videos. But we're just going to kind of give the onion a whack, just like I did. Be very careful not to get your hands. And we're going to peel the edge of our onion. We want to get the skins off. Because we definitely don't want that in anything it is that we're making. Now, bolognese is actually a sauce, a meat sauce, and is often termed as Bolognese Ragu, and Ragu in Italian cooking is really just a sauce with meat. But bolognese comes from the city of Bologna, which is in the northern part of Italy and is in the region of Emilia-Romagna. And that is, like I said, where this sauce originates from. And in the dish that we're going to be making, which is lasagna bolognese al forno, that literally translates to lasagna with a meat sauce, lasagna bolognese, so the sauce of the meat of the region or city of Bologna, where it comes from, in conjunction with al forno, and that literally just translates to baked or in the oven. So you want to go ahead and start chopping, like I said, your onion. And one of the easiest ways that you can make this happen is you can run your knife down the onion like so. And I really need to have a much sharper knife than what I have. I need to make a note to sharpen my knives. I really need a new set. You want to go ahead and cut down the onion. And honestly, cutting this onion in half may have made this a little bit easier. And I'm probably doing a lot more work than what I should. But we're going to start, like I said, making the cuts down the onion like so. And then you can also score it this way make sure to stabilize and not to cut your fingers. But then what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and slice down long ways. And what it's going to produce, as you can kind of see here, is already diced up onion. Probably got one more slice down. Good. So go ahead and put that off to the side. Here's our onion. Very important for flavoring our sauce. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our carrot, and this carrot is already peeled for the most part. It's washed. We're just going to chop the ends off like so. And again, if that's something that you want to add to your kitchen scraps, again, makes great stock later on, stock that you can use for soups or the base of another sauce, whatever you would use stock for normally. But we're going to take our grater, and as you can see, box grater has many different size holes that you would use for grating. For this one, I want to have a fairly medium grate to our carrot. And so right here, this is something that is really fine. This is something that's going to produce something wider and thin, a little bit bigger crumbles, particularly when you're grating cheese, so on and so forth. So I'm going to use the medium holes here for grating, and I'm going to just start grating one end of the carrot. Now you want to be very careful as you're grating. Obviously you don't want to get your fingers too close. You don't want to grate your fingers at all. And what this is actually going to help do is this is actually what the role that the carrot plays is helping to sweeten the sauce. So carrot has a lot of natural sugars in it, and you want that when making a tomato sauce. The tomato has a lot of natural sugars in it as well, but this definitely helps lend a sweetness as opposed to adding sugar. So as well as the flavor of the carrot as it's on its own. You're not really going to be able to taste the carrot in the sauce. It's really, like I said, just more or less going to lend its sweetness, but then, especially because we're grating it up so fine, it's going to melt into the Bolognese. So just a few more grates here. Shake out your grater, make sure you get all those, flying all over the place. Make sure that you're getting all those lovely grates. And honestly, I think we could add a little bit more. So this is going to be about half a cup of carrots, maybe about 3/4 to a full cup of chopped onion. And I don't typically, measure whenever it is that I'm cooking, so I really have to think about the amount it is that I'm putting out there when making my videos for you. All right, that should be enough. We can go ahead and set that off to the side as well. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to chop our garlic. Now, you can buy the already done chopped peeled garlic. However, I would not recommend that. To me, it's a little bit more bitter. You're going to get a much better, much more fresher taste with fresh garlic than you are with the pre-done stuff. Now, you can also get a garlic press and press your garlic. However, I like to chop it again. What we're really looking for here out of the garlic is flavor, and we want it to yield and lend as much as possible. So I'd say about 3 large cloves should be enough. I need a bigger cutting board too. I'm gonna go ahead and move this out of the way. And we'll actually start chopping up our garlic here in just a minute, because what we're going to do is we're going to add the garlic towards the end of our vegetables cooking down. We don't want to add it in right away, because what will happen, the carrots and the onion is going to take a little bit longer to fry up and cook in the oil than the garlic is. And if we throw the garlic in right away, it's going to become bitter if we burn it or cook it for too long, and it's not going to yield the flavor that you really want in your sauce. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go ahead and add some olive oil to the pan. Now, one thing I will say about olive oil is you want a really good quality olive oil. If there's one ingredient that you're going to splurge on, I would make it the olive oil. A lower quality olive oil can really make or break the flavor of your sauce. Higher quality olive oil is going to lend a certain fruitiness and flavor that will complement your sauce. So again, if there is one ingredient that you're going to splurge on, definitely make it the olive oil. So we want to go ahead and add about 1/4 cup of a good quality olive oil to our pan. I already went ahead and put some in there prior to turning on the camera. All right, so what we want to do is we want to get this hot, and then you want to go ahead and add your onion and your carrots. Have that turned off. So what this is going to start doing is it's going to start sizzling. If you can't hear it already, so we got our carrots and our onion in there cooking away. And then one thing that I definitely would recommend is seasoning in layers. So you want to use good quality salt and pepper. Freshly cracked is always best. And we're just going to lightly season our vegetables with a little bit of salt and pepper. And we're definitely going to be adding more. We're going to adjust the flavors as this cooks on. But we're going to go ahead and give this a stir. Oh, some of it fell out. That's okay. All right, so while that hangs out and does its thing, we're going to go ahead and we're going to chop up our garlic. Oh, missed a piece of onion. So, one of the ways that I like to chop up and prep my garlic is, and one of the ways that I can show you how to do it is when you have a whole garlic clove, to peel it, you just take your knife like this, smash it, and the peel comes right off. Okay. I'll do that with our other cloves. Sometimes if they're small enough, you can line them up, give them a good whack. And the peels come right off. Almost. And once we get our garlic cloves peeled, if I can ever get this skin to come off, there we go. The end there, the root end, we're gonna just kind of nip that off. That off to the side. Nip that off. And that one as well. Okay, and then we're going to begin chopping up our garlic. So, good knife tip, whenever you're chopping, make sure that you bring your fingers in like this with your knife along your knuckles and chop down like this. If you leave your fingers out, you run the risk of like your knife slipping and it hitting in your fingers, and you definitely don't want that. That means potentially a trip to the emergency room, and that's no good. But we just want thin slices for our garlic. I don't have super knife skills. I'm not able to whiz really, really fast like your stars on Food Network, but that's okay. But essentially, as you can see here, this is what you want. Okay? Do that for the rest of them. Ooh, flyway garlic. It smells so good in here. The onions cooking, once we add the garlic, it's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be a really, really great base to your sauce. Okay, just kind of let that hang out for a bit, and in about, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes total, once you add the onions and the carrots in the pan, they'll be done, they'll be nice and caramelized. I'll show you what they look like and show you when to add in your garlic. So now that we have our garlic chopped up and our onions and carrots are still doing their thing in the pan, one of the things that we need to do is we need to start prepping our tomatoes. Now, you can use canned crushed tomatoes where the tomatoes are already crushed, but I do recommend for a higher quality sauce that you use a San Marzano tomato. Now, these tomatoes come from San Marzano, Italy, and in most opinions, especially most Italians, they think that these tomatoes lend a great quality tomato sauce. So that's what we're going to be using today, is a San Marzano tomato. But again, if you want to make it your way, you can definitely use already crushed tomatoes, or if you're skilled enough to be able to make your own tomato sauce or passata, definitely by all means, go ahead and do that. So we're just going to open up this can. And these are whole peeled tomatoes, packed in their own juice. Ooh. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and dump these into the bowl. And I want to show you the texture of the tomato. So as you can see, it's a whole tomato. What they do is, you know, they score it and they boil it and then they peel it, so there's no skin, but the tomato is whole. And we're going to crush them ourselves by hand. Now, why it's good to use a whole tomato like that and crush it yourself is you can control and vary the texture. So here we go. Take those off to the side and get your hands in there and start picking up a tomato and begin crushing them. So, you may want to wear an apron when you're doing this, or a shirt that you don't care about getting tomato on, as I'm pretty sure that I just did. And it's going all over the counter, so it's just, yeah, it's going to make a bit of a mess. But you can try to control it by crushing them while they're already in the sauce, and just trying to do that as low into the bowl as you can. You definitely don't want to crush them up here, because then it's going to go everywhere. So you just want to give a good crush to these tomatoes. And cameraman, if you want to bring the camera over here and show the texture of these tomatoes as it's getting crushed, what it looks like. Wish you guys could smell this. It smells so wonderful. Such a sweet aromatic scent to these tomatoes. But as you can see, it yields more juice. A lot of really good tomatoey texture. You know, if you're someone who doesn't really like tomatoes, or you don't like the texture of tomatoes, you can use a passata, which is just a smooth tomato sauce. That's where you'll get, you know, just basically this smoother stuff right here. Crushed tomatoes are those who would like kind of a lighter texture of tomato bite. But for those of you who like a good, you know, tomato, they are going to cook down as you make the sauce. But for those of you who do like a good tomato texture, crushing them yourself, you know, this is something that if you like cooking in the kitchen with your kids, this is a great way to get them involved, because I'm pretty sure they'll have lots of fun sticking their hands in the bowl and squishing all these little squishy pieces of tomato. So I'm just kind of feeling around here for any chunks of tomato that I have not quite crushed. And I think we're actually pretty good. I'm just going to kind of give this a quick stir with my hands. Now, funnily enough, why do this by hand? You could use a tomato masher if you really didn't want to get your hands dirty. But the true, authentic Italian way is to dig in and use your hands. They're definitely one of the better kitchen utensils that it is that you have, because it really allows you to feel the texture and really get a feel and get to know what it is that you're cooking with. Definitely no better kitchen tool than your hands. So it's time for us to go ahead and add our garlic now. And if you want to come on over here and take a look at what we got going on in the pan, I want you to take a look at this color, this texture of what to expect as you're cooking. So as you kind of see, the onions have become a bit more translucent. There's a few brown bits in there that you can see. This is definitely the stage where you're at, because the next few things that we're going to do are, it's actually going to come together here very, very, very quickly. We're going to go ahead and add the garlic that we chopped up. And, dropping all the little pieces. We're going to go ahead and add the garlic in. And in about 30 seconds, that'll be done. And it'll be time for us to go ahead and add in our meat. We want that wonderful garlic in there. We definitely don't want it to burn. Things like, onion and garlic and stuff, those things are called your aromatics, and there's a really great reason for it, because as you use them when you're cooking, it smells up your whole kitchen, your whole house. It's just really, really, really wonderful. So, about to get ready, but again, we don't want to burn our garlic. So here's what we're going to be using for our meat, or to make the ragu portion of our sauce. I got a pound of ground pork and a pound of ground beef. This is, the particular 80-20 ground beef. We do want that fat content, because that's going to also lend a really good flavor and release some oils into our sauce. But we're going to go ahead and add that in. Baby. Okay. And I'm actually going to switch utensils now for a second, because what we want to do is we want to break this up. And the ground pork, in particular, is definitely tougher to break up than the ground beef. But you really want to get it in there, let it cook in, and begin breaking it up, because you definitely don't want large chunks of meat in your meat sauce. And we're going to want to get this to a gray color, because once it becomes gray, we're going to add our next ingredient, red wine. So we got our pork and our ground beef in here, and once it gets to a gray point is when you're going to want to add our next ingredient, which is going to be red wine. Now, what you can do instead of ground pork is you can add ground Italian sausage, whether it be mild or spicy. That's one way that you can make it your way if you like. I am doing the ground pork, however, because I do like to be able to add flavor to my sauce on its own. So again, we're seasoning in layers, adding a little bit more salt and pepper. And one of the things that you can do, again, if you like to be one of the ones to control your spices, is you can add in red pepper. So I do have some, and I am going to add in a few pinches, because I do like it to be a little bit spicy. So since I can't get the lid off, I'm just going to add a few shakes, not too much, and give everything a good stir. So if you want to come take a look, as the meat starts to cook, naturally it's going to take on a grayish color. And this is about the point that you want it to start adding in your wine. As you can see, it's not completely cooked all the way, but it's just at that grayish point where it is starting to get to be cooked. So we're going to go ahead and add in about half a cup of wine. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the heat, because as we all know, alcohol can ignite with flame. I don't necessarily think that we're really getting it anywhere near close, or really going to add in so much to where it's going to ignite, but I don't want to take that chance. So get you a nice good red wine. I'm using Pinot Noir, but if you want to make it your way, you can use whatever type of red wine that you like. Chianti, Cabernet Sauvignon, whatever you like. Okay, gonna add in about 1/3 of a cup. Whoop. Might have to clean that up before I reignite. And as you can go ahead and see, you know, it just turns it a little bit of a burgundy color to your sauce. Okay, so we added our red wine, and now we're going to let our meat cook the rest of the way. And don't worry, I mean, the alcohol is going to cook out of the wine. What we're really looking for is the flavor. So you're definitely not going to get drunk off this Bolognese. You were just really looking for the flavor of the wine. Okay, breaking up a few more pieces. It's coming to a point soon where we can add in our crushed tomatoes. And the pan is kind of hot. What did I do with the pot holder? That's okay, I can use this one. Smells. This is going to be one great sauce. Okay. And now as you can see, we don't really have any more pink left in our meat. It's all completely grayed, which is exactly the point that you want it for when you add in your tomatoes. Got a really nice good cook going on there. Okay. And next we're going to grab our tomatoes. And at this point, whenever you start to add in your tomatoes, I may not use all of these, and that's okay. I can reserve whatever it is that I crushed up to make just a plain, regular tomato sauce that you can use tossing with pasta. But we're going to go ahead and add this in. Be careful of any splatters. And it actually looks like I'm going to use the whole thing. Okay, we're gonna scrape out all of our juicy, juicy tomato bits. Right here into our pan. And I went ahead and took the liberty of lowering the heat down to low, because once you add in the tomatoes, when you heat them up, they tend to splatter. And that can sometimes not bode very well for your sauce. Now, traditionally, Bolognese would not use this much tomato. However, you know, I am making it my way. But if you would like to make it your way, if you want to reduce the content of the tomatoes, you know, that is perfectly fine. Yeah, so like I was saying, you know, you don't have to add in as much tomato. Traditionally, you know, there's not as much tomato that's added to a real Bolognese as an Italian would make. But again, you know, like I said at the beginning of the video, Italian cooking is all about what you make it. And definitely, you know, you can make it however it is that you like, and that's the spirit of it, is that you can make it your way. All right, the tomatoes are well incorporated into our sauce. And now what we're going to do is we're going to add in the fresh herbs. So we've got, whoop, just dropped a leaf. We've got basil, fresh basil. We have thyme and oregano. And you don't need to chop these up. In fact, it's honestly better if you don't. It's better if you just pluck fresh leaves like this, especially when you're doing it with the basil. I think that'll probably be enough. Same thing with the thyme. All you got to do is when you take the time, you just kind of pull it back and the fronds will fall off. It might be easier if I just take off a bunch. See in there, a bunch goes flying everywhere. But you can take a stalk and you pull backwards on it and the little bits will fall right off. And it's okay if you get a little stem in there. We just don't want any big ones. And these are very aromatic as well. Now you can make it your way. I know not everyone has access to, you know, fresh herbs. It is okay if you use dried. Just make sure that you use less dried than you would fresh because the dried flavors are very, 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 very concentrated. Just plucking off a few more pieces here. Another really good reason to do it by hand is that when you do it by hand, you're releasing all the oils. There's a lot of good oils in these herbs, and honestly, that's part of what yields the flavor when you add it to the liquid in your sauce. Okay, and then the same kind of thing for the oregano. You know, just pluck off a few leaves. No real knife required. And this is all completely to taste. If you're not big on heavy spices, you know, you don't have to use a whole lot. Same thing, you know, with your salt and pepper, you know, if you're trying to watch salt in your diet, if you're trying to, you know, make it to where, you know, if you just, you know, can't handle, you know, really spicy things, you can always do all of this to taste. I don't really measure, I do everything it is to taste. Later on, once the sauce melts, if I find that it needs a little bit more something, we can always add it in, but we can never take it out. So remember that. So with your basil leaves, just like this, you want to pluck off any stems that came along with it, you know, something like that. And we're going to take our leaves, and we're just going to rip them up, just like that, and add them directly into the sauce. No need to chop. These fresh herbs smell great. You're going to lend and add a better quality if you use fresh herbs, but again, dried is totally fine as well. And we're just going to rip them up like that, add them into our sauce. Take the time. Trying to grab as many little fronds as I possibly can. Right in. Okay, same thing with the oregano. Okay, we're just going to rip them up, drop it right into our sauce. Okay, then we're going to give this a good little stir. Smells great. And as you can see, there's little bits of basil and the oregano all kind of incorporated in. It's going to be a really great flavor. Now honestly, this is going to be the longest part of when you're making a lasagna, and as your sauce cooks is usually when you can prep some of the other things. Like the pasta, I'm going to show you how to make a good fresh homemade pasta. We're not using box, as well as you know, as the sauce cooks, you know, you can make the pasta because it's going to take some time to cure. But yeah, so let the sauce cook for about at minimum an hour. Now, the longer you go, the better. The more that the flavors are going to marry together, and you're actually going to see that sauce, all the ingredients melt in, and it's going to become really smooth and really easy for when we go and actually assemble our lasagna. But we're going to let that hang out. I'm going to go ahead and clean up, and I'm going to get ready to show you how to make fresh pasta. Hi, I'm Rebecca, and welcome to Cooking My Way, where I'm going to show you how to make great homemade meals from scratch that you can do at home. We're actually going to start today by making a homemade tomato sauce, more specifically a Bolognese that we're going to use in a lasagna that I'm going to show you how to make in another video. But the Bolognese, and even more specifically a tomato sauce, is a building block to a lot of other Italian dishes that you can add the sauce to that I will show you how to make in more subsequent videos. But grab your ingredients and let's get to cooking. So, welcome back. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to make a homemade pasta. Now, the egg pasta is what I'm going to focus on making, and if you can recall, whenever I was talking about the meat sauce, the Bolognese, how that came from Bologna, which is in the region of Emilia-Romagna in Italy. The egg pasta is also native to the northern portions of Italy in Emilia-Romagna, where your dried shaped pasta is made with a semolina flour, and that's really more indicative to southern portions of Italy. And I'll kind of give a brief explanation as to why. So in the northern part of Italy, historically, they were more affluent, they were a more richer region than the southern portions of Italy, and they could afford things like eggs. In general, they used a wheat flour that was ground very, very fine, and as you can see here on the bag, this is tipo 00, or 00, as Italians would call it, doppio zero flour. And it really doesn't have anything to do really with the quality of the flour as much as it has to do with the grind of the flour. So doppio zero, or 00 flour, is a much more finer grind. Cake flour is a finer grind than the 00. All-purpose being a little bit more of a coarser grind than your 00, so this really falls in between the two. Now, you totally can use all-purpose flour when making your homemade pasta, totally acceptable, totally fine, but for the purposes of this video and doing it my way, I'm going to use the traditional doppio zero flour. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to combine my doppio zero flour with semolina flour. I do feel like the semolina adds a bit more better texture than just using the doppio zero flour alone, although traditionally you can use just the plain doppio zero and the eggs whenever you make your pasta, but in this case, like I said, I'm going to add both. Now, if we were making a harder pasta, as you would in southern Italy, you wouldn't use eggs at all. You would actually use just straight semolina flour with water. Water being a bit more readily available and a lot cheaper back in the olden days of Italy, when eggs were something that was not generally affordable or attainable. So one thing to know whenever you're making your pasta is ratios do matter. So you want 100 grams of flour to 1 egg. So for every 100 grams, you want 1 egg. So if you're making or using 400 grams of flour, then you want 4 eggs. And typically, 100 grams to the 1 egg ratio is 1 serving. So I'm making, trying to make a big, sheet of pasta. So I'm going to make quite a bit, but typically, whenever you make your noodles and stuff, I'm making flat noodle for lasagna, but whenever you cut it up into noodles, which, I can either show you in this video or I can make another one, you'll notice that, whenever you cut out the pasta shapes or the flat noodles, 100 grams of flour to 1 egg is equivalent to the serving for 1 person. Now, if you have a food scale, great. I don't happen to have one, but if you do, that would be the best way to accurately measure. But for those of you who do not have a food scale, about half a cup is the equivalent to 100 grams of flour. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and open up our flour. And what we're going to do is we're going to do 300 grams or 3 half cups, or a total of 1.5 cups of the doppio zero or 00 flour. It's really sealed. I'm having a bit of a hard time opening it. There we go. I ripped it. Pour it this way. So right into the cup it goes. You kind of want to shake it down to Make sure you're getting good measurements. Now the best way to measure would be, you know, to have this in a tub and to like get a scoop or scoop it into here and then shave it off the top to get your most accurate measurement. But just for time purposes, I'm just going to shake it out and measure. So we're going to go ahead and dump that out. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be making a pile. So I need 2 more of these. Shake it out. Ooh, careful. This part can get really messy too. Okay, kind of shake it out. Put that there. One more of my 00. Set that off to the side, and then I'm going to get, seal these bags really good. I'm going to open up my semolina. And I'm going to pour out a ½ cup or 100 grams of the semolina. Now, I want you to take notice on something with the semolina. The whiter, the better, or the more pale in color, the better. The less quality semolina flours tend to be more yellow in color. Your higher qualities are going to be as close to white or pale as possible. This, I would say, is about a medium grade. It's not quite as yellow, but it's not as white as you could find it. Okay. And we're just going to kind of mix this up by hand. Notice that I'm doing this all on my wooden chopping board. There's reason for that. So historically, or just traditionally rather for Italians, they make their pasta on a wooden surface using a wooden rolling pin if they're going to roll it out by hand and not use it by machine. That yields the best texture to the pasta and lends a very sort of rusticness to your dough. If you spill some over to the side, that's fine. I don't believe that my cutting board was quite big enough to do this. Now, if you don't have a wooden cutting board or wooden rolling pin, totally fine. You can do it on your counter surface or any surface that you choose. If you don't have a wooden rolling pin, that's fine too. As you can see, I don't. Mine's just a non-stick. If you don't have a rolling pin at all, you can use a bottle of wine or any weighted cylindrical object to roll out your dough when it comes that time. We're not quite there yet. Okay, so this is well incorporated, and I'm just going to kind of put that back into a pile. Now, what I'm going to do is with these 3 fingers, I'm going to gently swirl it around, and I'm going to make a well in the center of my dough. And I still want good walls, and I'll show you why here in just a moment. Ooh, stuff's just falling off the side, and I guess that's okay. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take these eggs and we're going to crack them right in the center of our wall. And this is done the traditional way in Italy. Most Italian grandmas, nonnas, make their pasta. And you notice these eggs are of really, really good quality. So I'm using organic, farm eggs. This isn't the white variety that you would normally get at the grocery store. They are large eggs, and that is important. You do want to use large eggs, but the quality of your egg is really going to lend a good color and a good texture to your pasta. Careful not to get any shells, and be careful not to let it run over the side, and that's what I'm fearing right now if I had this last egg. Didn't happen. Very lucky. So again, my eggs have a little bit more of an orangey reddish color. It's great. It's going to lend a great color to our pasta. So you're going to very gently break your yolks and whisk your eggs there right in the center. And once you get a nice good whisking on your eggs, once you get them well incorporated, is when you're going to start peeling in the sides and adding the flour to your dough. Now it's going to pick up a little bit there that was on the bottoms, and you have some from the side that it's scraping. You want to make sure that you don't get it spilling over the side. But see here, we got a nice good scramble to them there. Now we can begin to start adding in from the sides here, just little by little, and really incorporating that in. See, as you can see, it's starting to spill over. It's okay if it does, but definitely want to, see what I mean? Definitely want to avoid doing so. Oh, okay. So as you can see, my cutting board wasn't big enough. I'm just going to finish this out on my counter. And it looks really messy and dirty and nasty, and it's not. This is the traditional way that pasta is made. So you just get your hands in there and start mixing and incorporating in all of that flour with your egg, combining your wet ingredients with your dry ingredients. And having a knife or a bench scraper on hand is going to play very helpful, as this dough tends to become very, very, very sticky. So as you're incorporating it together, you're gonna see it's gonna stick to your hands, and that's okay. The stickiness will go away, and you can always add more flour as you go along. So as you can see, this is now starting to incorporate. The egg has begun to incorporate with the flour, and all I'm doing is I'm just kind of pinching it together, and I'm about to start my kneading process. Peeling it off my hands as I go. So now we can start pinching it and pushing it together, really making one bigger ball of dough as it starts to form together. Put a little piece of paper in there. And all these little dry bits, we can begin incorporating that into the dough here in just a moment. Take the excess off your hands. You can do that by rolling them together, and the dough will kind of just fall off. And by the way, when you're doing this, make sure your hands are clean. I did wash my hands before I started to begin working on making my pasta. If you need a little bit more flour, because like I said, this dough is sticky, totally fine. You can grab a little bit of that doppio setto, sprinkle it on, and that'll help make it less sticky. So again, we want to kind of start forming it into a ball so we can begin our kneading process. And that's what we're doing here. You're going to want to knead this for about 10 minutes. And the technique to kneading is all going to be in the palm of your hand, or the heel part of the palm on your hand. So you're going to want to gather up your dough, like so, in a ball. And you're going to want to, with the heel of your hand, roll and push forward and bring it back. Roll, push forward, and bring it back. Roll, push forward, and bring it back. And if you have smaller hands, totally okay that you can use the two-hand method, but the point is that you want to stretch out your dough. And again, don't worry about the little dry bits that fall off. You can pick those up at the end. But you're going to want to knead this for about 10 minutes. Point being is that you want to begin to develop the gluten and the proteins in the flour. That's what's going to give your pasta a good chewy texture. And the more you knead, the less sticky it will become, especially as you pick up some of these drier pieces. process is very, very messy. So with the palm of your heel of your hand, push forward, bring it back. And you notice I'm also kind of slightly turning the dough as I work it. I think I need a little bit more flour. I'm going to use a little bit of semolina this time. Roll and push forward, roll, push forward, push forward, push forward. And you'll start to kind of feel this come together. The dough will become harder and harder to knead and stretch out as you develop those proteins and those glutens. It's a great workout. Definitely helps for eating pasta guilt-free as you burn those calories making the homemade pasta. And I can't stress enough, the taste of fresh homemade pasta versus, the store-bought, the dried pasta. I mean, they're okay. And honestly, if that's the one part that you're like, I really don't want to make the homemade pasta, I want to, buy the pre-done lasagna sheets. That's totally fine. You can certainly do that. However, the fresh pasta, which is indigenous to the northern part of Italy, Emilia Romagna, and certainly for this dish, lasagna bolognese al forno, making that fresh pasta is just going to make it all that much more authentic. And it's better for you. All the preservatives and the sugar and things that they can add to the store-bought pasta, you're not getting that here when you make it yourself. You can control the ingredients, you can control the freshness. Definitely makes it better. Okay, so as you can see, the dough is getting a little bit harder to work each time. And I'm going to start picking up those dried bits that fall off. You're not going to get all of them, but that's okay. And however you want to knead, whatever makes it easiest for you, you got a technique down, by all means you can definitely make that your way. Okay. So I got the dough at a nice good consistency. I'm going to kind of form that up into a ball, like so. And I'm going to cover it with a little bit of olive oil once I can get some of this excess dough here off my hands. Incorporate that back in. It's a lot of dough, very sticky. So I'm going to take a little bit of olive oil, and it's not going to take much. It's only going to be that might actually be too much. You just want to lightly, coat the surface because you don't want your pasta to dry out and form a skin. So coat it up all over. Nice, good hard dough. A lot of good proteins worked up in there. Okay, and then we're going to cover it with some plastic wrap and let it rest for about 15, 20 minutes. And then once it rests, the glutens and the proteins will be nice and relaxed, and then that's when we can begin to roll it out and make our pasta. See what it is. So what I'm going to show you now is how to make a bechamel, or a white sauce that's going to go on lasagna. Now, some people will add ricotta cheese. I personally don't really like the taste of ricotta cheese. I prefer using the bechamel, the white sauce, when I'm making the lasagna, and it's going to be one of the saucy layers that we'll add in when I show you whenever we assemble the lasagna. But you're going to start with 5 tablespoons of butter, which is what I've got here. Okay, and we're going to begin to melt this. And you want equal tablespoons of butter to flour. And the bechamel sauce is a very, very simple sauce. All it is butter, flour, and milk. Now you can add a little bit of salt if you like. Some people may add in pepper or parsley. I like to keep it very basic because Italian cooking in general is very, very simple, very basic. So it's going to be butter, flour, and then milk. If you want to make it a cheese sauce, you can. By adding in cheese, but we're not doing that in this particular sauce. Okay, let our butter start to melt down. Now you can use the doppio zero flour like I'm about to, or you can use the regular all-purpose flour. Either way is fine. The flour taste is going to cook out as you make the sauce, and you want the sauce to be particularly thick but still viscous enough in order to be able to spread out on your lasagna, and I'll show you the right consistency once we get there. You want to melt out your butter, being careful not to overcook it or brown it. And one way that you can get your butter to melt down faster is to cut it into smaller pieces. Just kind of giving it a little bit of a quick stir around in the pot. Almost there, needs a little bit longer. While that's melting, I'll go ahead and get my whisk. Also, while I'm doing this, because we're coming to the last few steps, we still have to roll out our dough and make our lasagna dough sheets, but we're coming to our last few steps of making our lasagna. Our sauce is going to be cooking for almost near a full hour now, and it's going to mature and it's going to be ready for us to assemble our lasagna. But I went ahead and started preheating my oven to 350 degrees. Okay, and our butter is melted. So I'm going to go ahead and add in the flour. Remember, 5 tablespoons of butter. We're going to go ahead and add in 5 tablespoons of flour. And you want to go ahead and mix it as you're doing it. And we're almost making kind of like a roux. And ooh, I'm going to go ahead and turn my heat down because I don't want to burn anything. Here's 4 and 5. Okay, we're going to go ahead and give this a stir and incorporate it all the way into our butter. Okay, and when we got this over the heat, what it's going to do is it's going to start cooking at that flour, so you won't have that floury taste, but you don't want it to cook too long before you start adding in the milk. So it's about 1 1/4 cup of milk. You want to make sure that you are using whole milk in this recipe, so full fat milk for sure. And we're going to add it in slowly because we want, and I'm just eyeballing it here, but we want to make sure that our flour and butter mixture fully dissolves. We don't want to have any clumps in our bechamel sauce. A little bit more. So as it heats, the sauce is going to thicken up. And like I said, it's going to cook out the flour, the floury taste. You definitely, you know, as you make this, want to make sure that you are constantly stirring so nothing sticks or burns to the bottom of the pan. Turn up my heat a little bit. Now I've been making bechamel sauce for a while, so I know when to eyeball my milk, but for those of you at home making this, 1 1/4 cup is what you want. Just make sure that you're adding it in slowly. And if you feel that you need to add a little bit more, you know, definitely add in a splash at a time. So this all comes together very quickly. I say about 5 minutes total. And if you want to come see the consistency here of the sauce, you can kind of see that it has a good thickness to it. It's not quite where we need it. And as it's heated, it will continue to get thicker. But as you can tell, it's definitely not a particularly loose sauce. It is a rather thick sauce, and as you can see, actually right now, it's come to that good thick consistency that we're wanting. Okay, I'll go ahead and cut the heat. And this is the consistency that you want. Not too runny, but definitely, you know, scoopable, something that you can add into your lasagna for sure. But this is the consistency that you want right here. Not liquidy at all. And as a matter of fact, to ensure the cooking process completely stops, I'm going to remove it off the burner. But that's the bechamel sauce. Here in just a moment, I'm going to roll out our pasta dough and begin making our lasagna sheets. So now it's time to roll out our lasagna dough. We're going to make our lasagna sheets. And let me go ahead and get my pan out. This is the pan we're going to be using. And the dough, now that we've let it rest, is nice and squishy and supple again. So it's going to be very malleable, very great to work with in order to be able to roll it out. And look at that beautiful yellow color. That came from the egg yolks, and that's exactly what you want. Good quality eggs are going to yield that, but whatever eggs you got on hand, make it your way, it'll be just fine. So we're going to lightly flour our surface, and we're going to roll it out into a pretty big sheet. So if you got the surface area to work with, definitely you know, make sure that you roll it out. Make sure that you are also flouring. I mean, this is non-stick, but I also like to put a little bit of flour on there that helps ensure it stays extra non-stick. So we'll go ahead and flop out our dough. And grab a little bit of flour because we want, you know, our surface that we're working with, you know, we definitely don't want anything to stick. Make sure we got it on both sides. Okay. And then, actually, before I forget this step, now I've done this before. I've tried to roll out a huge ball of pasta and it doesn't work very well. So what I'm going to do is cut off a section of it. And then make sure that you keep the rest covered as you're not working with it so it doesn't dry out and form a skin. But if you look at that inside, that's the texture that you want in a pasta dough. And I'll actually come to the camera and show you. That kind of texture right there is what you're looking for in a good pasta dough. It's going to give it a nice good chew and texture. So again, make sure it's nice and covered in flour, and we're just going to start rolling it out. Now to start, you can roll in one direction, begin rolling it back. It is easier if you do use a pasta machine. The pasta machine does all the flattening and stretching for you, but the real tradition, rustic Italian way is to do this by hand with a rolling pin. So that's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna begin rolling this out. And once you get it, you know, nice and flat, you can start rolling it out in different directions. Now the goal is to try to make it round, but I'll be honest with you, I've never been very good at doing that, so I'm just trying to work with it as best as I can. Even more so important is to make sure that you got it even textured. I'm gonna go ahead and flip this over and begin working out our dough. So right now, what I'm trying to do is make a good lasagna pasta sheet. You want it to have a nice thinness to it, but you don't want it, you know, to be too thin, because if it's too thin, it'll fall apart when you try to cook it in the oven. Okay, flip it over again. Put nice, even pressure on your lasagna. And it's okay if it's not exactly the perfect shape. I'll show you how you can incorporate it into the pan. Give this one more flip. Give it a little bit more of a roll, and then begin working that into our pan. Now, before we actually place the pasta sheet into the pan, our sauce is actually ready, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna take a ladle, and we're gonna ladle just a little bit of sauce into the bottom of the pan. Not much, but enough to coat, and you just kind of give it a quick push around to coat the bottom of the pan. And what this does is this ensures that your bottom sheet of pasta does not stick to the pan. And so the bottom, the bottom of your pan should look something like that. Now, we have our knife, so we're going to go ahead and cut out a basic rectangular shape for our lasagna. As you can see, it's not super thin, but it's just substantial enough in order for us to be able to bake up a good lasagna. And I'll show you what you can do with these extra pieces here in just a moment. So you want a nice, good rectangular piece like that. You want to go ahead and center it in your lasagna pan. Now, what you can do is you can take some of these extra pieces and begin assembling them out along the edges of your pan where that piece didn't happen to touch. I could probably cut this down like so and fill in where I need. No waste. That's an important part, no waste. And the bottom of my lasagna pan now kind of looks something like that. So we're going to continue to do this again as we build out our layers, but for now I need to go ahead and get prepared with our cheeses. I need to cut up some cheese and get ready to build the layers of our lasagna. So I'm going to go ahead and shred up our cheese. Now we do want a fine grate on this particular cheese, and I'll explain the differences in the cheeses here. This is a Parmigiano Reggiano. This is a hard cheese. I definitely recommend that you freshly grate it. Get a good quality Parmigiano Reggiano. You can find good quality Parmigiano Reggiano already grated. You definitely want it to be a fine grate, not the shreds. However, if the shreds is all you can find, that's totally fine too. Just make sure that the finer the better here is what we're going for. But definitely don't use the Kraft Parmesan cheese that you find in the green cylinder in the grocery stores. It's not fresh. It's most of the time not even real. And it's not going to lend the best quality or flavor to your lasagna. So please do yourself a favor, buy some good quality Parmigiano Reggiano, or you can use Pecorino Romano. Either one is totally fine in this case. They're really good hard cheese, very nutty cheese. Aged, the longer it's aged, the better. So I'm going to use a very fine grate here, which I think is this one right here on my grater. And I'm going to begin grating. And we're going to need a lot, so. Very laborious work. And I'm going to stop there for a second. This is the texture it is that you want. See, it's almost kind of like snow. It looks like the stuff that you buy in the green Kraft Parmesan cheese tube, but is definitely much, much better quality. So we're going to want about half a cup to a cup, more or less, depending on how much cheese you like. Now I do want to make a comment in that this cheese is, in addition to being nutty, also salty. So keep that in mind as well as you season your sauce and your lasagna as you make it. Very laborious process it is grating cheese. But all in a good workout, burns all those calories off before you dive into that pasta. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and stop there. If I do eventually need more, I can always come back and grate more. But now I'm gonna move into the mozzarella. So moving on to our next cheese, this is a fresh mozzarella. Again, I highly implore you to use the fresh and not the shredded that you find in the bag. The shredded that you find in the bag doesn't have the right moisture content, and it certainly isn't going to be the freshest, best quality. And if you can find mozzarella di bufala or buffalo mozzarella, that's going to be even better. It's such a creamy, sweet flavor. You could also, if you're familiar, substitute burrata, which is a mozzarella cheese, but it has a soft interior and it kind of melts once you cut into it. It looks like this, but soft interior and it melts out. Really, really good. Either one would be particularly fine, but again, I highly implore you to pick a great quality cheese. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and slice it. And this is roughly the thickness that you want, about half an inch, quarter of an inch or so. Definitely no bigger than a half inch. And we're gonna need and want a lot of cheese. Now, these are kind of uneven, and they do tend to spread whenever you press your fingers against it, which is totally fine. That's going to become very helpful whenever we assemble our lasagna. Now, if you are hard-pressed looking for a good fresh mozzarella, you can use bocconcini, which are little tiny balls of mozzarella or pearl mozzarellas. Those are fine as well. Now, if you're here in Texas, most of the ingredients that I got today are available at Central Market. So, definitely if you're looking for the finer ingredients to use, I would recommend going there. However, Kroger will have pretty much all the good staples it is that you need. I just need a piece of the cheese. All right, so our cheese is done, and I'm gonna go ahead and roll out another piece of the pasta. I'm gonna go ahead and cut off another bit there. Cover what I'm not using, okay? I'm gonna kind of form this up into a ball and reflour my work surface. Okay, make sure this is nice and floured and my rolling pin is nice and floured. All right, and then we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna begin rolling out one way. I need to turn that for whatever reason it's wanting to move around on me. There we go. And kind of turn it, and just using a method of rolling out one direction and then rolling back the other direction. Applying even pressure as we're rolling out the dough, because again, we want to make sure that the texture, or rather, I'm sorry, the thickness is what is consistent. Once we get it into a good basic shape, we can flip it over and really start pushing it out in all directions. Now, if we were making egg pasta to cut it into, flat noodles, when we go to make and cut the noodles, we would actually, once we're done, throw them into a boiling pot of water for about 2 minutes to cook off any excess flour and to really get our noodles to the right consistency and temperature for eating and tossing with our tomato sauce. But in this case, these are going to be cooking in the oven because it is a lasagna, so no real need for that stuff. You can, but not necessary. Now, traditionally in the Emilia-Romagna area, whenever they make homemade lasagna, and especially when making it with their own fresh pasta, they add spinach into the dough. And I can show you in another video how to incorporate spinach into your dough. You're going to do it at the stage where you're mixing your flours before you make the well and add the egg. That's when you were adding your fresh spinach. And if you have a food processor, you're really going to need it for whenever you make a fresh spinach dough. Great color this pasta has, all thanks to those fresh eggs. Okay, I believe that's gotten to the right thickness that we want, so we're going to go ahead and do the same thing and cut out our basic rectangular shape. And one rule of thumb is you just want to cut off the uneven edges when you make your rectangular shape. Okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to build the first layer of our lasagna. So you can, at this point, go ahead and add in your Bolognese. And we don't want the Bolognese to be too thick. We definitely want it to be thicker than how we added it in the first layer. But I'll show you what that looks like here in just a minute. That pan is getting hot. Give it meat is definitely going to be the main star of this show. So that's about the thickness that it is that you want in your sauce layer there. And then on top of this, we're going to add our bechamel. So it's kind of thickened up even a little bit here. Really don't need that anymore. So I'm gonna take a good sized spoon. If you have a gravy spoon, that works just as well. I wouldn't say spoon. You definitely don't want to use a slotted spoon. I can't find my big spoon, so I'll just use my gravy spoon here. And I'm going to add in a little bit at a time the bechamel. Just kind of, and I'll show you what this looks like here in just a second as you add it in, just adding it, you know, over your lasagna surface. It's okay if it's relatively uneven, it's going to cook out in the sauce. Okay, and then we start adding in the cheese. So take a good handful of your Parmigiano Reggiano. Okay, sprinkle that in. And I'm definitely going to have to grate more. That should do it. And then begin taking your mozzarella and flatten it out with your hands, like so, and add that over your lasagna layer surface. Again, it's going to kind of melt out. It doesn't necessarily have to be in like perfect, even, you know, pieces or whatever. You know, you just want to make, you know, get most of it covered. That's the main important thing, is that you get most of it covered. All right. And so that first layer of meat cheese is done. And the bechamel. So now we're going to add in our next layer of lasagna pasta dough. And you can cut off pieces as you need it to kind of fill in gaps. You know, oftentimes whenever you go out to a fancy Italian restaurant, you know, everything looks super perfect and stuff. That, I mean, like home Italian cooking, it really isn't the same. I mean, it's never going to look, you know, too particularly, you know, pretty. I guess beauty really is in the eye of the beholder, because I think it looks absolutely fantastic. But ultimately, it's, you know, it's not made to look fancy. It's made to be, the concentration more is on the flavors and the quality of the ingredients. You know, the presentation is just kind of what it is. So now that we got another layer of noodles here, we're going to come back and add more meat sauce. And for any typical lasagna, you're going to want to build about 3 layers. Which is all I think this pan is going to be able to hold anyway. Ooh, can't forget the bechamel. Now, to your preference, you can certainly add more or less bechamel to your layers as you like. I like a good certain creaminess to my lasagna, and it definitely yields great complement to the Bolognese. Might be all it's going to allow me to do. And need to rinse off my hand. Got a little bit of bechamel and then I got it all over the faucet, which is okay. Going to need to grate just a little bit more Parmigiano Reggiano. And then sprinkle that all over. And then add a few more layers of mozzarella. Oops, just dropped a piece. And again, I'm just flattening it out with my hands, crumbling it up as I layer it over the lasagna. Okay. Now, if you wanted to stop here, technically you could, but everything's bigger in Texas. And it's lasagna. Everybody loves lasagna. So we're going to go ahead and add one more layer. I am going to have some extra leftover pasta dough. And if I wanted, I could, pop this in the fridge, use it tomorrow, roll it out, and make a nice bowl of pasta with some of the leftover sauce that I'm going to have, and just cut up some tagliatelle or pappardelle, which are flat noodles that have a bit of a width. As we know, spaghetti is very thin. Most of us know fettuccine and the width and the flatness of that particular kind of noodle. Well, tagliatelle and pappardelle are wider than your fettuccine noodles. Tagliatelle being right in the middle of pappardelle and fettuccine, and traditionally Bolognese is served with a tagliatelle or pappardelle noodle. But I'm going to go ahead and work this one out. Be our last layer. Again, just giving it even pressure, going back and forth. Ooh, kind of folded up on me. Remember, the name of the game here is consistent thickness all the way around your sheet. Now, when we do make the tagliatelle, fettuccine, or pappardelle noodles, we are going to roll it out much thinner than we are our lasagna sheets. And again, that's because all we're doing is we're just throwing those in boiling pot of water and then tossing it in, dressing it with our tomato sauce. lasagna noodles need to be a bit more substantial in order to be able to cook for a longer period of time in the oven. Starting to stick. Just throw a little bit, that happens, just throw a little bit of flour on your pasta and on your work surface. So again, we just cut out our basic rectangular shape. Or in this case, maybe a square. And we're going to layer that right on top. And go in with our excess noodles and fill in. Okay. And then this time we won't add bechamel to the top layer. We're only going to add the meat sauce and cheese. Quite heavy now. Take the last little remaining bit of any grated Parmigiano Reggiano that you have. That's not really what's important in the top layer as much as in adding in your mozzarella. Now with this top layer, you definitely want to cover more surface area with mozzarella. Because what we're going to do towards the end of baking time is we are going to broil it and give that nice brown to the cheese. Looks like I need to cut up some more. At this point, I don't have very much left, so I can just kind of peel off what I need. Okay, so now this is ready to go in the oven. So I do recommend that you put it on a baking sheet. This is just in case anything happens to spill over. The baking sheet will catch it as opposed to it spilling in your oven. It'll also make it easier to remove in and out of your oven. 350 degrees for about 30 minutes. Depending on the heat of your oven, it may take a little bit longer. You definitely want it to be bubbly. Remember, your meat, everything in this with kind of the exception of the pasta, is already cooked, and your pasta is going to cook in the sauce when it's in the oven. Very heavy. There it is. And there we go. So about 30 minutes, give or take, and then after that 30 minutes, for the last few minutes or so, you're really going to have to watch this because broiling can go very quickly. You're going to broil the cheese on top. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you make it. If you do, drop a comment or a picture in my comments, because I definitely would like to see how you made this lasagna and how you made it your way. Thanks for joining Cooking My Way here in my kitchen. See you next time.